It is important to understand how those transactions can and should be processed to protect not only yourself as a business owner, but your customers. In this session, you will gain an understanding of the various regulations that apply to the acceptance of gift and loyalty cards and electronic checks, both at the point of sale as well as in the increasingly popular consumer not present environment. So we really want you to talk about this webinar. We have a hashtag that we're using on Twitter, and it's RSPA-EDU. And today and every day you can follow us at Inside RSPA. We also want to make sure we have some housekeeping items out of the way before we get started. We definitely encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation. Due to the fact that we have a lot of folks that are multitasking or en route somewhere, I'm sure making that sale, we want to keep the lines as quiet as possible so everyone can hear. So we won't be taking live questions, but you can certainly tweet your questions to with using that hashtag RSPAEDU, or you can enter them into the question box that's found in the lower right of your control panel. And then we also have a chat box that you can enter in questions as well. So I'll be accumulating those questions for our speaker to answer at the end of the presentation. We will be recording today, so if you do have to drop off early or if you want to share the content with some of your coworkers, or maybe this kind of webinar is something that would be a value add to your customer, we will have a link to this recording on our website, and the website is www.gorspa.org/education. You can look at the bottom of the page for the Blackboard icon, and it'll say Archived Webinars, and you can go on that icon and find the recording to this webinar. We are very, very pleased to welcome our presenter today, David Mapes. He has been in the merchant support channel of Global E-Telecom, Getty, for 10 years. With a strong background in technical support, having served in the United States Air Force for 9 years, maintaining computers, switchboards, and other electronic equipment, Dave came to Getty as a tech support representative. Dave rose to managing the technical support department, which supports upwards of 55,000 merchants and over 2,000 sales channels across the country. In this position, he is known as a resident expert on value-added services and technology and prides himself on being able to tailor products that best fit the needs of the customer. When Dave is not on the job, he can be found spending time with his 4 boys or cheering on his Michigan Wolverines. Dave, thanks again for joining us today, and the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you for that introduction, Amber, and welcome, everyone. I want to thank you again for taking the time to participate with us today and hope to provide you with some useful information. So today we'll be discussing, as Amber had said, check and gift and loyalty regulations. As an overview, we're going to discuss the basics of check acceptance, discuss how you're accepting checks in the different environments and how those environments impact what regulations apply, discuss Check 21, the newest way to accept checks as a form of payment, and lastly, gift and loyalty regulations. So let's not waste any time. Let's get right into the basics. The basics of the National ACH Association, or NACHA, apply to transactions that are processed through the automated clearinghouse. They must be drawn off of a U.S. bank. Now, that is not to say that you can't accept checks from outside the U.S., but that financial institution has to have an operating establishment within the U.S. So if you have a Canadian or a South American customer, for example, and they're drawing off of their bank, as long as that bank is also operating in the U.S., then that is an acceptable form of payment. Consumer authorization is required for all ACH transactions. Now, that can either be a signed authorization, a verbal recorded authorization, or a written authorization. You have to notify the consumer that their transaction is being electronically processed, and the consumer has to be given the opportunity to opt out. They can opt out by requesting that the check be manually deposited the old-fashioned way or by presenting a different form of payment. Regardless, the consumer does require to give authorization, or the system does require that the consumer provide authorization. The standard entry class, or SEC code, now those of you in the bank card industry, don't confuse that with SIC code or category code, but the standard entry class code must reflect the authorization method. And we'll discuss more about the authorization methods as it pertains to the environment that you're accepting the transactions as we proceed through the presentation. But the SEC code must reflect the authorization method. So it's important, if you're utilizing a third-party processor, that your processor know in what environment are you interacting with your consumers, so they know how to properly code your transaction. All ACH transactions can be returned within 60 days. That is not to say that there aren't larger windows and smaller windows that pertain to the type of return, but all ACH transactions can be returned by the bank within 60 days. So how do you receive your checks? Very important that you ask yourself this question as you venture into accepting checks as a form of payment, especially as it pertains to ACH processing. Are you dealing with your consumers face-to-face? Are you accepting mail order or telephone order transactions? Are they being dropped off at your establishment? Are they entering these transactions through the website? So answering that question provides you with the method that is best going to suit your needs. And there are programs under NACHA that meet each of these different types of environments. So face-to-face transactions, or what is commonly known as point of purchase, or POP. These are designed for the retail storefront establishments where the customer is walking in, filling out the check, and handing it to the cashier right at the point of sale. So this would be a traditional retail establishment dealing directly with the purchase of goods or services. Back office conversion. This is where the transactions would be collected by that employee or cashier for processing at a single point of entry later in the day. ACH debit, recurring or one-time. Perfect for gym memberships, any type of a subscription type service, storage facilities. Utilize this type of program where they can schedule payments to take place at a predetermined time for a predetermined amount. This can be done through prearranged payment and deposit, PPD, for consumer to merchant transactions, or corporate credit or debit, or CCD transactions for business to business type of dealings. Telephone initiated transactions. These would be the consumer calling in, such as to make your car insurance payment, pay your utility bill, provide your routing and account number over the phone, and they initiate that transaction. Internet or mobile initiated, or what we call in the industry web transactions. These would be initiated by the consumer through some type of a shopping cart or to check out over their smartphone or internet browser. And lastly, the accounts receivable conversion, or ARC. This is where the payments are mailed in, received by the consumer, or received from the consumer through a drop box, and then processed later in the day. So how do these different environments impact what your regulations are? My apologies. Represented check entry, or RCK. This is the electronic processing of a previously returned item. Moving on, how do these different environments impact your requirements? So what are the requirements for point of purchase or back office conversion? It's a single debit only. These types of transactions are not eligible for a recurring type of transaction. The routing, account, and pre-printed check number must be encoded in magnetic ink on the instrument. The instrument in this case being the check. Without those items, the transaction cannot be processed electronically through the ACH network. Pop and box transactions can be no larger than $25,000. Completed or signed by the consumer. The consumer must complete the transaction, the check transaction, filled out completely, made payable to the business, dated, signed with the amount, before handing it to the merchant. Checks should not have been previously used by another POP entry. So once you use a check, for example, and they give it back to you as is done in a POP transaction, that transaction or that check is then void. It should not be used at another business for another POP transaction. So let's talk about ACH debit. For PPD transactions, which we stated a moment ago were for consumer debits, it is eligible for both single and recurring debits or credits. Written authorization with clear terms and readily identifiable as an authorization with terms of how to revoke that authorization are required. Credit entries do not require this authorization. CCD transactions, which are business-to-business transactions, are eligible for single or recurring debits or credits. Requires an agreement between the two organizations. Both parties should retain a copy of the agreement, and a copy of the agreement may be requested by the banks that are involved in the process. Credit entries do not require this authorization or agreement. Not primarily used for personal, family, or household purposes. It has to be for the business. TEL transactions, or telephone-initiated debits, can be single, or recently it was opened up for recurring transactions. Authorization must be readily identifiable. This can be done via a recorded authorization or a written authorization from the consumer. Clear and understandable terms of the debit must be provided, and again, readily identifiable. The authorization must include all of the following: the date on or after which the debit will occur, including the frequency if the transactions will be recurring, the amount of the debit or debits, the consumer's name, the account number that will be debited, the telephone number that the consumer can call if they have any questions, disputes, or require any customer service, the date that the authorization is being provided, and a statement by the originator that the authorization is for a single ACH debit, unless it is a recurring debit. Again, the authorization must be written or recorded by the merchant. Web transactions. The consumer must sign the authorization. The electronic signature by the consumer is permissible. The authorization must be readily identifiable as an authorization. no ambiguous terms, must have clear and understandable terms, must provide the consumer the ability to revoke the transaction. So let's talk about ARC transactions. These are transactions that are received by the merchant for processing at a later time. They're eligible for single debit only. Routing, account, and the pre-printed check number must be encoded in magnetic ink, just like with a POP or BOC transaction. And again, just like POP or BOC, the transaction amount cannot exceed $25,000. Completed or signed by the consumer, the check does need to be filled out, made payable to the business, dated, signed, with the amount field completed. Which brings us to where the check processing industry is moving. Check 21 came about as a result of 9/11. The banks recognized with the aircraft grounded that they needed an easier or more efficient way to move the documents across the country. So enter check processing for the 21st Century Act, known otherwise as Check 21. This allows the financial institutions to route electronic or substitute checks, which is a digital image of both the front and endorsed back of the check, between institutions. So no longer do they have the cumbersome and time-consuming delays that come with the handling of the paper checks, the mailing or the routing of paper checks from one bank to another. Front of the check image is required. Consumer authorization is not required. So unlike ACH transactions, where the merchant is responsible for obtaining and notifying the consumer that the debit is going to take place, in a Check 21 environment, that authorization is not a requirement. So it makes the acceptance of these transactions easier from a merchant perspective, also easier from a financial perspective. The consumer cannot opt out of a Check 21 transaction as they can an ACH transaction. And that $25,000 limit that existed on POP, BOC, and ARC transactions does not exist for Check 21. Third-party processors may institute a cap to help mitigate risk. Instruments not eligible for processing via ACH can be processed electronically. So this would be money orders, cashier's checks, third-party checks, equity line of credit checks, etc. So those transactions that previously could not be processed via the ACH network can now be processed via Check 21 by providing a front and endorsed back image of the check. This brings us to gift and loyalty. The Credit Card Accountability, Responsibility, and Disclosure, or CARD Act of 2009, is the federal legislation that outlines gift and loyalty transactions from both a merchant and a consumer protection standpoint. It limits inactivity and dormancy fees, provides for improved disclosure requirements to the consumer, limits expiration dates on stored value cards. Some examples that recently went into effect in New Jersey, it mandates that gift cards and certificates be redeemable at full value and place requirements on establishments accepting stored gift cards. Pennsylvania recently changed their law from 5 to 4 years before a gift certificate or a gift card is presumed abandoned or unclaimed. The federal regulations are defined by this CARD Act. Each individual state provides their own provisions and regulations regarding dormancy fees, inactivity fees, and responsibility for abandoned or unclaimed cards. You can review those at ncsl.org. Each state is outlined on that site with what their provisions, their regulations, their definitions are of the acceptance and processing of gift and loyalty cards. Got through the presentation a little quicker than had anticipated, so Amber, I will turn it back over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, David. We do appreciate your time today, and the information was fantastic. Something that the RSPA hasn't talked about a lot, so we do appreciate you sharing this with our members. And if you all are interested in contacting David for questions, his email address is on the screen. It's dmates@globalettelecom.com. That's DMAPES@globalettelecom.com. So right now I can open the floor up for questions if there are any. I've been getting some questions, more technical questions about the presentation and such during the call, during your presentation, David, so I haven't gotten any about the content yet, but I'd like to go ahead and offer the opportunity to any of our attendees to ask questions now. You can do so by entering the question in the question box on your screen, or you can just enter it in the chat box. There's a chat box at the bottom of the control panel, and you can enter in the questions there. But if you do have any questions, we're ready to take them now. Let's see. In the meantime, David, I can just tell everybody about our sponsors of education. I think that's on our next slide while we wait for questions. Well, actually, no. I want to tell you that Getty will be back with us. We have some more great information that will be coming from this fantastic RSPA member who really gives us the details we need to equip our members with how to sell gift and loyalty, how to process checks, et cetera, et cetera. This is stuff that we really don't feel that our members can get many other places. So they're going to come back to present on April 20th with how to sell gift and loyalty. Today we got information on you know, the regulations, what you need to know to service your customer best, and they'll be back on April 20th with more points to make about how to sell it, how to make it something that you add to the solutions you provide your customer. Transcripts. I've got a question on transcripts. That's something I can take care of. Actually, we can talk about it. I'll talk to David and see if we can have a transcript, but we will have a recording of this webinar available, and I can get the link out to all of our non-members. I think that when I mentioned earlier that you can access the archived webinar on our site, it is for members. I think that section of the website is only accessible to members, but we're hoping that all of you now have an interest in the RSPA, so you'll join, but we will send a link out to you all who attended that will allow you to access that recording. So we'll get that out to you, and then I'll talk to David about a transcript or some notes that we can provide to you guys. There is also a form. I don't know if you wanted to talk about that, the worksheet that you are going to provide to the attendees, David. We will be sending kind of a supplement to today's workshop after today's call. So you did enter in your email address when you registered, and that's what we'll use to send it out. If you wanted to talk about that, David, I don't know if it requires that or not.
I'll be happy to, Amber.
Okay.
To all of you that participated today and provided your email address, Amber will be forwarding over kind of a handout or a supplement, as she had said, to the presentation that just goes into a little more detail about the various environments, provides you with the terms, so you have a better understanding of how NACHA views these transactions, and it just further expands upon the overview that was given today of what types of transactions would or would not be eligible for different types of environments. And again, Amber will be getting that out to all of the attendees today that provided an email address. So welcome any feedback or questions that you may have after receiving that, and hope that it serves as a useful resource for you and a useful reference as you move forward.
And we will make that. I will send it out by email. And then for those that tune in, let's say you have a coworker that wasn't able to join today, we'll make the handout available next to the recording link, so they'll be able to download both when they're able to access the recorded webinar. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions for now. I just had a couple questions that I asked about, to follow up. I'll continue. I just wanted to let you know also that we have Getty coming to Retail Now 2013, and they will be a part of our education effort there. So stay tuned for that as well, and hopefully you all are aware of Retail Now, and if not, you can go to our website to find out more information. We also have what we call education sponsors, and these are the companies that really make these opportunities happen. We have awesome partners like Getty who take the time to provide the education and brainstorm on what education would be most relevant to our members, but we also have people that kind of put the money up to help us pay for things like the webinar technology. So we'd like to thank them: Blue Star, Business Solutions Magazine, Epson, Merchant Warehouse, Toshiba, and then those are our founding education partners, and then we have annual education sponsors. This year they're APG Cash Drawer, DataCap, PC America, Pre-Key Tech, ScanSource, STAR, and VSR. And please, if I butchered the name, if you're representing the company, forgive me. I've been in the role for 3 months, so I have an excuse still. But anyway, if you'd like to become a sponsor of our education, you can certainly contact us for that information. If you like today's session and really want to know more and join us again, we offer a webinar twice a month, 2 to 3 times every month, and you can find out more about what we have at gorspa.org/education. We also welcome your feedback, so please, if you have any comments, suggestions, or ideas that you'd like to share with us, you can do so by emailing education@gorspa.org. And also, if you've got a topic that you'd like to learn more about, perhaps this was something that you just want more information on, certainly let me know that. My email address is amurdoch@gorspa.org, and you can send me an email with the specific topics you're interested in, and I'll do my best to try to get a webinar put together for you. So anyway, if you have no questions, and I'm not seeing any, wait, one more, let's see. I have a question, David, and this comes from Henry. David, since a merchant cannot control NSFs, in parentheses he has R01, do you anticipate NACHA and the banks supplying a real-time verification tool? That's first. And then, can you give a look into the future for any verification tools?
Excellent question, Henry. I appreciate that. I don't anticipate NACHA providing any real-time verification tools. However, there are third parties out there that operate under the regulations of NACHA that provide verification tool and negative database entry and maintain national databases of known bad check writers that merchants can utilize to help reduce their vulnerability and exposure to NSF or R01 transactions. As to the future, technology is an amazing thing, and it is taking strides daily. New point-of-sale terminals are partnering with these third-party processors to integrate into the payment and the consumer experience to provide that real-time, what I'll call neg entry or negative consumer check, to help reduce that exposure that merchants have to fraudulent transactions or insufficient funds, closed accounts, whatever the case may be. So the tools are out there for merchants to utilize to protect themselves from that exposure and to eliminate those losses. You just have to find who is best for you to partner with to provide that tool.
Great. Okay. And Henry, if you had a follow-up question at all, just send it over and I can ask it, but I hope that is sufficient for you. I have another question from Bernard, and you may have alluded to it in your first answer, David, but it is, any advice on verification services to prevent bounce checks?
I would agree, Amber, that we did very much allude to that in the first question. Bernard, my advice would be to consult with whoever it is that's providing you with your merchant services solution, your credit card processing, and see who they're aligned with to provide you with the third-party services that I'm referring to for verification and even guarantee services. There are third parties out there that not only verify the transactions against that national database, but if they provide an authorization, they then assume the risk to guarantee those funds. So you would be completely protected from any exposure to insufficient funds, closed accounts, and they provide direct funding to the merchant almost identical to what you experience in the credit card industry or with the processing of your credit card payments.
Great. Now, Bernard did say that it looked like it was answered already, but I'd always say it never hurts to get as much information as possible.
Certainly, certainly.
Yeah. I don't see any other questions for now. I think that we, obviously your presentation was so thorough that we got all the questions answered during the duration of the presentation, and we do thank you so much, David, for taking the time out today to present to our group. And we certainly appreciate the time that you all in the audience took out of your day to join us for this fantastic session on check and gift loyalty regulations. Again, we will put this up on the website. It will be live later today. Again, if you have any questions, you can certainly email us here at RSPA at education@gorspa.org, or you can email David directly at dmapes@globaletelecoms.com. So I don't see any other questions, David, for now, so I will go ahead and conclude our session for today. Thanks to all of you, and have a fantastic rest of your Wednesday.
Thanks, Amber.